we're going to start now. So thank you. Good afternoon, and welcome to the third day of Damien's Cultural Diplomacy Marathon. I think we're all hitting that wall right now, but we're at the 26th mile, and it's going to be coasting downhill from here on out, I believe. We have a really phenomenal panel, and I want to start by thanking the Centro Niemeyer and the Aspen Institute for this convocation. And I especially wanted to thank, Damien Pabuano for going to such, lengths to be globally inclusive in his call for dialogue on cultural diplomacy. Our three panelists, I'm going to start with Pablo Alonso Aja, immediately to my left, to your right, who in 2001 founded and heads the Cultural Capital Advisors that provides wealth management and philanthropic advice to high net worth families. Previously, he was in private banking for Banco Santander International and for the Instituto Bancario Sao Paulo di Torino. Following is Pamela Auchincloss, who is the CEO of Artist Pension Trust, which she helped to co-found. And APT is an innovative long-term financial planning program created to serve and benefit contemporary artists. APT was established in 2004, and earlier this year it completed its first venture in New York with the full participation of 250 artists. The fund currently has over 1,000 participating artists in 8 regional funds. And finally, rounding out our panel is Michelle Constant, and she's been the CEO of Business and Arts South Africa since 2008. It is a nonprofit organization supported by both corporations and the government of South Africa, and it aims to advance strategic partnerships between the business and arts sectors of that country. Michelle also enjoys a stellar reputation in the media sector, and in 2004, she was named Arts Journalist of the Year by the Arts and Culture Trust in South Africa. Let's give them all a warm welcome. Now, when I first started, and learned about my participation in this panel, I thought about the two polar extremes that can equally represent this topic. On one end, you have the sky-high auction prices of artists like Jeff Koons, Jasper Johns, or Damien Hirst. And on the other end, you have handcrafted wares of indigenous Bolivian artisans, just to give an example. So this art market continuum is connected because of the basic human traits that each represent: creativity, invention, and the need to create artifacts that go beyond a mere utilitarian use. We think about the Bolivian artisans who wove a magnificent shawl and used brilliant dyes on the threads and intricate patterns in its design that do not add anything to the utility and use of the shawl. It doesn't make you warmer, but it does dazzle your eye. And more importantly, from the perspective of the weaver, it tells you what region of Bolivia it comes from and something about the tradition of his or her tribe. Now, in 2006, when the art market was nearing its peak, Mark Spielger wrote in New York Magazine an article that was entitled 5 Theories on Why the Art Market Can't Crash and Why It Will Anyway. And in it, it's an entertaining piece, and he gives an example of the kind of hype that can drive contemporary art prices through the roof. He mentioned 2 German artists from the Leipzig school, and here I'm going to quote the article. They created a pre-sale sensation. You could have bought such works for as little as $4,000 a few years back, before the Leipzig school hype started building, and neither artist had ever come to auction before the Fries Fair. There was some surprise when Tim Atoll sold at $212,000, or 3 times the high estimate. But the stunner was Mateusz Weixer, who's estimated at $31,000 to $38,000, and his painting soared to $370,000, instantly making it shorthand for everything overblown about the current market. End of quote. So I want to start by asking Pablo Alonso if he would be so kind as to help us to identify the next hot young artist we can purchase.
I wish.
But seriously, Pablo, I wanted to ask you, as an investment advisor on what I call the commodity asset, motivated end of the art market continuum, does this marketplace help to advance creativity and invention, or is it simply a finance machine?
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, the Niemeyer organization and the Aspen Institute for this opportunity. I believe the last month has been very interesting in the art market, and the financial market, obviously, as you read in the newspaper. No? I think we have to separate what happened in the art market in the last months or years from in two perspectives. One is the bubble perspective. I think the art market follows the financial market they have a correlation, a strong correlation. So what we see, especially in some part of the art market, the contemporary works in the last 2 years actually, it was the price multiplied by 3, by 4 without any real reason, only was the interest on some emerging collectors that push these works from unknown artists to the skyrocket price. So it was all the characteristics of the bubble. And this bubble was formed because the tremendous creation of wealth in those segments, in the financial market in the US, the hedge fund managers, all the banking executives that create tremendous wealth and then invest a part of this wealth in the new artists. And particularly, and it was a very interesting experience, was the emerging market, the new emerging market investment, the Russian, the Chinese, the Indians, that really bring the work from these emerging artists in contemporary, for example, contemporary Chinese market to the sky-high levels that it was really astonishing. But the truth is, after this bubble burst and the market, to give you a figure, in the last 12 months has been down for more than 30%, and depending on the estimate of some banks and some research, is going to be down 60% at the end of the year, especially for the contemporaries. What is going to be left after this bubble rest? And regarding the new innovation, I believe with this new money that enter in the market from the contemporary, helps to identify and to nurture new talent, specifically for emerging new young people, especially in emerging markets, that, for example, in the area of installation, that was totally unknown like years ago, or video art. So I really think it's a new innovation, and all these new collectors, they're helping a new trend. A new trend is a new asset class within the art market. So the art market is evolving, and in the future you're going to see art based in the internet, for example, is going to be more and more. So definitely, as an asset class, it's more relevant for the wealthy individuals, for the wealthy collectors. We'll see more creative ways to develop art. So we can discuss a little bit later.
Yes, we'll get into that a little bit further in our conversation. And related to this aspect of this end of the continuum of the art market is Pamela's artist pension trust, which has really been a very innovative approach to helping the creators of works of art to benefit from the machinations of the art market. Her website really provides a very clear description of how the process works and for the organization she's created. And in the interest of time, I'm going to summarize it quickly. The Artist Pension Trust starts with a region-specific curatorial team that is highly experienced in the field of contemporary art. They review and select up to 250 artists for participation in a regional program fund. Each participating artist invests works of art instead of cash, contributing 20 artworks over about a 20-year period. The artist remains the sole owner of his or her artwork until the work is sold. Following the invitation to participate in the program, the artist and APT sign what's called an artist participation agreement. Within the first 6 months and annually thereafter, the artist is required to propose artworks for consideration by the APT director. The APT carefully stores these artworks until the time at which they're all sold. And during this holding period, works are made available for exhibitions to museums, galleries, and other pre-approved venues. When artworks are sold, each artist receives 40% of the net proceeds of the sale of his or her work. 32% of the net proceeds accrue to the collective benefit of all the participating artists in that specific APT fund. And this allows each participating artist to collectively participate in the commercial success of the other 249 artists. And then the remaining 28% of the net proceeds are retained by APT to cover all the management and programming costs. So Pamela, how did you and your colleagues come up with this innovative approach?
Thank you. And thank you, Louis. I don't need my paper anymore. That was really great to have that. It's so well explained. I appreciate it. And I also wish to thank Damien for inviting me to participate in this panel discussion and an event. It's been very, very interesting. I'll take the word security, since this is where we're driving our conversations. Security. What creates a sense of security for a person? What is it that finally gives us the knowledge that we are safe? I propose that it's freedom. Freedom to choose where and how we live, what religion we practice or do not practice. Freedom to speak without persecution. Freedom to be who we are despite the differences we live amongst. I focus on freedom of choice because artists can be likened to a subaltern community or collective, in that they are largely marginalized within our society. Their access to choice, financial choices, employment choices, and a range of privileges that we experience and have access to as a general population do not exist, and it largely does not exist because of their practice. So the founder of this company, in visiting an artist studio, asked him what his long-term financial plan was, and the artist said, it starts with today. You know, you buy an artwork, then I can pay my studio rent tomorrow. Giving further thought to this, he thought, well, how can an artist build and benefit and participate in a long-term financial scheme? And with an economist who did copious research on the performance of the art market over the last 100 years, they came up with the plan that Louis has described. Artist participation in this is indeed a selective process. Artists are chosen in order to try to create a financially viable model. But the mandate of the company is not so different from an NGO or a not-for-profit, because ultimately the return from the sales, 72% of the return from the sales is returned to the cultural diaspora. We work around the world, and a conversation that Michelle and I were having earlier was a bit about sort of the political circumstances and the realities of the artists that we're working with. In particular, I just returned from the Istanbul Biennale, which was a highly politically driven, polemic exhibition curated by artists from the Balkan states. And a number of our artists working there, well, the Lebanese artists, to draw a point, live, a number of them largely displaced from the country because of their viewpoints and the nature of their practices. One work, Manira Al-Sot did a very interesting kind of catalog, limited edition collection of writings and artworks titled Aggression Buried Under Somewhere Else. No, Arrest Buried Under Somewhere Else, sorry, Arrest Buried Somewhere Else, dealing with the discourse of on the street, unwarranted persecutions on the street, arrest, and subsequently torture. So we're dealing with a very diverse and interesting group of artists. And an artist like Manera has a practice that's not entirely commercial, let me put it that way. So within our model, albeit that we're driven by a commercial mandate, we're not so different from Pablo, speculate on the art market and the potential of the art market. We also become an umbrella organization for those that don't practice within the commercial opportunities of the art world, and thereby, indeed, very much practice risk diversification and mutual assurance for those artists that stand somewhat independent of the markets that are driven by the consumer. One of the most often asked questions to corroborate Pablo's comment is, so how are you? How's the health of the APT, you know, in this crashing art market? I said, hey, we're fine. I'm not selling. You know, it's one thing to say that, yes, the values are depreciated 30% and they might be depreciated 60%, but a lot of this is tied to the auction phenomenon. I mean, we can talk about the stock market, and the stock market also took a 30% hit, but it's working its way back up. For how long, we don't know. But there are many, many healthy companies that are not within that index, and there are many healthy artists that are outside of that, in the auction index. So I would say that our fund, in fact, somewhat benefits from this downturn, because it just makes a greater case for our model. As Louis was saying, this is a long-term financial planning opportunity for artists. Any individual fund will serve its partnership for up to 50 years. So the vicissitudes and the machinations of the market, well, they're anticipated. An artist I met with the other day said, well, I don't know that I fit in. I'm a painter. This was in India 2 days ago. And he said, because video and photography are the medium of choice right now. I said, today, so you're the beneficiary of the photographers and video artists. Tomorrow, they'll be the beneficiary of the painters. So we never, I mean, you can't anticipate exactly where the market's going to go or what will drive the tastes and interests.
And what's so fascinating about the model that you've been now implementing and sort of nurturing in the world is that the artists themselves are really going to be beneficiaries of you know, not only of their own creativity, but of being sort of lumped together, hedging their bets, and, you know, out of a group of 250 young and emerging artists, you certainly can expect that, especially with a skilled curatorial eye that is helping you select these artists and creating that stable, so to speak, you really have a higher probability of success than a lot of other ventures, I would think.
And to add to that, because we were having this conversation about artist mobility, we are a very, very global organization. We're in India, we're throughout East Asia, Southeast Asia, throughout Europe, the Middle East, and of course through the United States, the Caucasus, the Balkans. You know, we're just everywhere. Africa, we're a little bit shy on, but we're going to work on that. And as a result, to your point, and Pablo and I were talking about this earlier, we're operating in so many marketplaces. So as a company model, the broadcast company model for its opportunities for success, if there's a market downturn in the European markets and there's an upturn in the Chinese markets, well, the company should be solvent, you know. And it was very much, that was very much in mind when the two founders of the company really devised the plan. And then also within the global context of a conversation, our company, albeit that we have regional trusts, if you go to our website, this is not so apparent, because the website really represents a global picture, a global collective, a global conversation, a global partnership of artists from around the world.
And there's also another asset to the website in that you now have this, you know, over 1,000 artists participating, and how many works of art?
4,500. We're about 1,100 artists now, and 4,500. And I think Lewis is going to say that you can view our collection online. We're very proactive about lending our collection. My business that I operated before was a cultural services organization. I provided curatorial services to small and mid-range art institutions. And so we've taken that model and we encourage curators to work with our collection. We commission curators to work with our collection. I was just saying to Michelle, we have a South African curator who's at the Sterling Institute right now, who's doing a one-day video festival, and she came to us because in one-stop shopping, she can get a global snapshot of artists working in new media around the world that are pre-select by curators that have international reputations and recognition. So it's on the financial side, it's asset management, you know, but on the cultural side, it's dissemination of information.
So when we started this conversation, I mentioned that I really saw the art market as a sort of a continuum. On one end, you have, commodity, asset motivated end of the market, and at the other end, you have the closer immediacy of these of artisans and artists, and they're linked to communities. And so now let's focus a bit on that particular side of the continuum. And Michelle. BASA's primary aim is to promote mutually beneficial and sustainable businesses and arts partnerships that will benefit society as a whole. So how exactly do you go about doing that?
First of all, I want to say thank you. I think everybody has said thank you to the Aspen Institute, and that's, I want to say thank you to the speakers who we've listened to over the last 24 hours. I think that they deserve a hand of applause. They've been both inspirational and innovative. But I do want to say that this morning I woke up with I was in a complete panic because I thought that obviously the modus operandi at this forum is that everybody quotes somebody. And so I woke up in a panic, and then I realized, well, we actually quoted someone in our annual report, so I'm going to quote it as well so that I can just be like everyone else at this particular forum. He is the American poet Robert Penn Warren, and he said, poetry is not the thing which we see, it is rather a light by which we may see. And at Business and Arts South Africa, we believe very strongly that arts and culture is the light by which we are able to see. It's the light which offers us a view on our history. It's the light which offers us a view on our potential, on our failure, on our success, on our very beauty, even our ugliness. And in many ways, I think that's completely intriguing, because then, of course, I started thinking, well, we heard Ramon earlier in a fantastic session previously talking about journeys and mobility. And then I started thinking, wow, it gives a whole new meaning to, traveling at the speed of light. And then I thought, well, what about the great words, and let there be light? It seems that everybody has something for the arts. We're traveling at the speed of art. We're let there be art. So in our case at Business and Arts South Africa, we do believe that. We believe that everything is premised on the idea that the arts are crucial to our society, that they're crucial to our world, not just for economic value or poverty alleviation or growth in a variety of sectors, but also because we believe that it grows our EQ as well. And I think that as we move into the 21st century, EQ is something that we all need to be thinking about. We do believe that there is a value for business in funding the arts. I think that it's difficult to qualify what that return on investment is, so we work a lot around the issue of return on objective, and we work with our businesses focusing on that idea. What is the objective of a business to fund the arts? What is the value for them in terms of their objectives? Do they want to be seen as pursuing a certain community or supporting a certain community? Do they want to be seen as branding themselves within that community? And we try and drive that quite in a focused manner. We also look at corporate social investment and marketing and the relationship between the two. I don't really believe that corporate social responsibility is simply corporate social responsibility. I think it is corporate social opportunity. And we try to drive that as an identifier for businesses who are our members. We have around 160 members from the very, very large financial institutions and large corporates, Anglo-American, the mining companies, to tiny little businesses of 2-3 people. They might be advertising or small media companies of 2-3 people. And we we offer them a series of, I suppose, benefits, you could call them. But for me, the most important benefit is that, A, we offer them research. We do intensive research into funding models in the country, who's putting their money into what, why they're putting their money into it, which genres of the arts are they focusing on, and why are they doing that. And we do that research every 2 years, and certainly for our members, it's extremely useful research in terms of where they may want to go when they start funding the arts at a later stage. We also offer a kind of bespoke consultancy which works around that process as well. If you're a very large business, a banking institute, you may be interested to know what the other large corporates are putting their money into, and we are able to then identify and see where the gaps are. The other thing that we do, apart from a whole bunch of things, is that we have media partners. And I think that that's one thing that perhaps at this forum has not really been addressed, is the function of the media in relation to cultural diplomacy. We've seen the media in terms of technology with Second Life. We've seen the media in terms of entertainment in the discussions yesterday around entertainment as telling stories, etc. But what about the role of the media in terms of telling the stories of the arts, telling the stories of the relationships between business and the arts? And the positive, I don't want to be all Pollyanna-ish about it, but the positive stories that are out there. I, as a South African, and I consider myself to be an African, am kind of disturbed when, for example, yesterday, I see images of the African continent, which are images which we are constantly being told is Africa. Child soldiers, brutality, real brutality. There are other parts to Africa as well. And I think it's very important that we use the media to start telling those stories as well. Who is telling those stories, and what are the stories that are being told? So as Business and Arts South Africa, we believe implicitly in that particular function. We have media partners in print, national newspapers. We have media partners in radio, the internet, TV, broadcasters. And really what we're looking at doing is stories of the arts that are valuable, that are exciting, that tell positive stories about what people are doing, not just in the arts, but in business as well. If we're going to take the thing of financial security, which is really what I focused on today, what we do with our artists, if we look at our three stakeholders, business, the arts, and government, what we do with our artists is we have a variety of projects where we focus on the education of artists as regards business. We're concerned that there's a lexicon which belongs to business, there's a lexicon which belongs to the arts, there's certainly a lexicon which belongs to academia, and we've heard that over the last 2 days as well. And we're concerned that sometimes artists are not able to bridge that gap, and likewise, businesses are not able to bridge that gap. They have no idea when they go into a discussion about sponsoring an artist what that artist is actually talking about in many cases. And it's a quid pro quo, it works both ways. So what we've established over the last year is a series of workshops in partnership with our National Arts Festival, which takes place in Grahamstown. And we run these workshops around the country, at festivals around the country, at conferences around the country, focusing on issues of the voice and vision of an artist. What does it mean to have a vision? What does it mean to understand marketing? What does it mean to understand governance and corporate governance? Social networking, absolutely crucial. The function of something like Second Life and the roles it could play. Legal entities. We do have a lot of pro bono support for artists, which our members provide, in fact. We have a couple of members who provide ongoing pro bono work to artists. Business plans, financing. You know, a little bit earlier in the session, I mean, I'm raving about the session prior to this, but it really was pretty great. There was a discussion around what education there is that's available to arts communities. And actually, when it comes to business, there's very little education. Even in tertiary institutions, if you study the arts, and it may have changed slightly since when I was there, which was years back, but I mean, if you study the arts, they don't teach you how to go out into the world and operate and run a business plan or a business proposal. They simply send you out into the world, and it's that supply and demand issue as well. So we're very kind of concerned about what that process is, and we're really trying to drive that as well. We produce quite a bit of literature for our artists as well. I did bring an example of one of the books. This was a book that went out at, it's a beautiful little book, I must say. I didn't design it, but I think it's fantastic. It's called the Artist Manager Book, and it is really essential information and practices for artist management in Southern Africa, focusing specifically on the music community for this particular project, but we do look at other opportunities as well, and just really giving people information. What does it mean to manage? What does it mean to look at a contract? How do you look at a contract?
So, Michelle, one of the things you mentioned to me was some of the projects that you fund, which actually you use small amounts of money, but that actually get matched and helped or leveraged locally. And what's the impact of that in those communities?
Well, the impact is, we have I'd like to think that it's really quite big. I mean, we have something called the supporting grants, and what we understand is that there are businesses who could be seduced, in some cases, to sponsoring the arts. I mean, there is value for them, but sometimes they do need to be seduced. And so, as a sweetener, artists would be able to go to them and say, well, you are the business, we'd like you to sponsor you. You can get a supporting grant from BASA. That supporting grant, which is supporting and not matching, would be used to leverage the relationship further between the business and the arts. So if you are Levi's and you're funding a fantastic project which is around HIV and AIDS and music, it's one of the best projects that I've seen in a long time around where social opportunity becomes marketing. Levi's would then be able to get a supporting grant which would leverage their relationship, it would help market them as well. And the value of that for us is that we get a database of what businesses are putting their money into. But secondly, we've seen a 1:17, about 1:17, it sounds insane, but a 1:17 return. So in 2008, 2009, we put about 1.3 million rands into supporting grants, which is very little. It's 1,500 euros or so. But that leveraged off 17 million rands of business, which is 1.7 million euros. So we're seeing a kind of huge leverage value. And a lot of businesses are coming in and they're saying, okay, well, if we can get a little bit more extra marketing, if we can get marketing, or if we can get publicity on TV, or whatever the case may be, we're going to be able to access that.
I wanted to give a little more weight to this end of the continuum of the art marketplace and give an example that I was associated with. 18 years ago, Peter McFerrin, who was one of the participants and presenters here, started the Quipus Foundation in Bolivia. And one of the things and I was brought in as a museum expert, and they were still dreaming about building their museums. But one of the areas that they had been working on was they were trying to preserve indigenous culture in Bolivia and to give value to that, because for a long time, the artisans of the various communities, indigenous communities of Bolivia, really were not valued. And so they started, and through their cultural development project, they actually created cooperatives and marketplaces for these artisans to be able to take pride in the work, in the crafts that they were still preserving and creating, as well as a marketplace and a demand for that work, so that they could get a fair compensation and earn a livelihood. And of course, they were phenomenally successful in doing that. So, in this continuum of the art marketplace, there is room, from the immediate impact of, artisans working in a community and keeping shelter over their heads and their family and feeding their families, all the way to the extreme of a commodity-based art marketplace where now, thanks to Pamela's approach, the artist can participate in the upside of the trading that takes place. But there is this, wonderful sort of artificial money machine that takes place, that is called traditionally the art marketplace in capital letters, which creates wealth as well.
I'd sort of like to speak to that a little bit and to this comment about supply and demand that was part of the earlier panel discussion. And indeed, it goes to what Pablo was saying. This conversation earlier said that we need to focus on demand, that there wasn't sufficient demand to deal with this oversupply that exists in the marketplace. Again, I speak more from the visual arts side, and perhaps they were speaking from the performing arts side. But I would take Pablo's point, and indeed, and Lewis's point, that by creating supply, you can create demand. So if we look at what's happened in the visual arts, a lot of this market interest and the young collectors coming into the scene and the galleries opening all over every urban center you can find, and the growth in New York, et cetera, and the markets, had to do with this uptick in supply, because the art schools were putting out an enormous number of qualified artists seeking venues and engaging in the marketplace. And so what happens then as you drive demand, of course, is you drive education in a way, and access and acceptability of art as part of the cultural discourse, but also the market discourse and the financial discourse. So that in your situation too, by creating a kind of microeconomic opportunity in countries where there are such constrained economic opportunities, wow, it's incredible what can be done.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask Pablo a final question before opening it up to questions here, and that is, as a financial advisor, what's your rationale for convincing the people who invest with you that the art market is actually a viable area for them to place a bet?
Okay. Let me just continue with your remark. I think it's interesting to point that there's an interesting trend in the philanthropic market, especially in Latin America, where is our expertise. We see this big collector, or maybe they have the collection based in the US or in Switzerland. They want to be back to the local market, to Chile, to Peru, and to set up foundation. As an example, foundation initially is going to cover the art collection, but this foundation is going to be to provide grants to the local artists to create, to educate, in some way, and to create more demand for this education. So there is a lot of activity in this situation. Obviously, they have to work out some legal concerns for the legal security in these local markets. But I think it's a positive trend, and it's going to improve in the coming years. Going back to your last question, what's the rationale to invest in the market? I think it's diversification. First of all, I will only advise to invest in the art market to the people who really is passionate about the market, because it's not a way to, if you don't understand the market, to buy a specific work because it's trendy and because you don't enjoy. And when the market is crashing, probably you're going to sell because you're scared. You are not emotionally attached to this work. But for the people that really like the specific part of the market, being contemporary, old master, whatever, I will say that from the financial point of view, only looking at the market, it's a great diversification tool. For example, the art market they have a lag from the financial market from 6-7 months. Let's see, the crash start in the financial market a year ago. You only see these results 6 months later. So they give you, from the financial point of view, they give you the time to redeploy your collection, to move assets. It's the same like if you buy, let's see, contemporary will be the Googles or the Facebook, and the old master will be the Coke or the AT&Ts in this world. So it's interesting the way, but you see the rotation. Some people are scared of the growth, and okay, let's go back to the secure value, and they start, and you see the old master, for example, in this crisis, they remain with a good value. So I think diversification is that's the real way. Also, in this environment with the uncertainty about the dollars, about the real value of the currencies, you see also a movement through to invest in real assets, being gold, platinum, or real estate, or art, which is a real asset. So I think it's going to be growing the role of the art market as an investment tool for diversification.
Yes, Michelle.
Can I just pick up on that as well, is that what we've seen in South Africa is a huge growth in corporate collections, in business corporate collections around the country, and a lot of them are focusing on contemporary art now, which is very exciting. Certainly one of the biggest collections belongs to the Reserve Bank of South Africa, and they're obviously seeing a huge value in that as well.
So let's open it up for more some interaction here. And is there any question from the audience that we could ask our panelists here about this continuum of creativity and from the marketplace, from community? Yes. And there's a microphone over there.
Thanks for this. It gave me a lot of thoughts to hear all that you have been doing. The first thing that comes to my mind, it starts with the title of the panel, Arts Market. And, well, I knew from the beginning that we would be talking about the visual arts. And I come from Atlanta, where I was an artist in residence in the performing arts. And we had the building of the performing arts. And then we went to the building of the visual arts. That was 5 times bigger. And it was not the building of the visual arts. The title was the arts. So the visual arts claimed the territory of arts a long time ago, and continues to claim this territory. And I wonder why. One of the things that comes to my mind is that there's something to collect. That's the word that came. There is something to keep. There is something to buy. And I wonder, how can you do what you do in terms of the performing arts?
No, that's a very good question, and it is true. I mean, it's a market phenomenon, the visual arts, or it's becoming more and more of a market phenomenon. So people, you can go home with something. And coming from New York and not having so much opportunity to enjoy the performing arts, and having sat on 5 dance boards between California and New York in the course of supporting the arts, I see it struggling more and more in dance and performance. It's a little bit alarming to me. But then let's talk about philanthropy. You know, this is where we're falling off the boat. That the whole idea of giving back to culture and giving back to your community and supporting the agency of the place you live is shifting. And I think of, in particular, the Landon Foundation is a good example, which was a visual arts, a literary arts, and I think maybe to a degree performing arts. I don't remember, Louis. Maybe you remember if they did in the performing.
They were in the performing arts as well, I think.
But about 10 years ago, they shifted their focus to social services and human services. And so I think probably why that happened when it did, I mean, it was way before this huge art bubble that we had, the visions and the interests of the founder. It's challenging. You know, you can export visual arts too. You can move it around the world much easier. We were talking about mobility earlier, and I was thinking, well, if you have to move a dance company, you know, to another venue, that's much more involved than putting a painting in a crate. And so exporting that information and creating a global consciousness and a global marketplace for it, which you can quite easily in the visual arts, is much, much harder. But I said to Michelle earlier, I think I came with some expectations about what the takeaway was from this conference, and that was really about diplomacy and how the arts function diplomatically within the crisis and the issues and the security and all the things that are going on around the world. And so I think what we need to do is sort of stitch things together more. I talk about our website, and we were talking about dissemination of information, and I think that the internet becomes an opportunity to create a broader consciousness, because having worked with many grassroots organizations, well, it's not sustainable, finally. It is for a while, but then the community outgrows the grassroots, and if the grassroots doesn't sort of build up or grow up with the community, it's very hard. And that's so many performing dance companies, and I was so interested. There were so many dance companies here. I didn't have an opportunity to see those sessions because I arrived late, but it's really challenging. And government sponsorship. I mean, I'd say really what Michelle's doing, public-private. I find this fascinating that you've got sort of seed money to get corporations to start to understand how they can engage in the arts, and then once they get the buy-in and understand what they're doing, they're educated to the value of their contribution to their participation, money started to flow 17-fold. I mean, this is remarkable.
I think if you have to take that idea, you've mentioned sustainability. I mean, I think that when you look at this idea of from seed to strength to sustainability, whilst I absolutely agree if you use the model of the painting, it's much easier to move a painting. It's not actually that. I mean, the costs on insurance, and that's a pretty costly affair than transporting a couple of dancers down wherever you want. But the one thing the painting doesn't have, and I mean, I love the arts, but I mean, is they don't have the live experience. And you need to start to learn how to bottle that live experience and really start to understand what that value is to people, you know. And certainly for us, if we look at businesses, a lot of businesses will come to us and they'll say, we want an event where we can take our clients. Now, in some cases, it may be an art exhibition, it may be a walkabout of the art exhibition, but it may also be a dance experience where afterwards they get to chat, they love it, to the beautiful dancers, and they get to have this whole really great relationship afterwards, or they get to speak to Hugh Masekela after the event. I mean, that, if you could bottle that, that's hugely valuable.
One idea that came to me in this forum, and since I have so many people here today, and I don't know if we're going to have another opportunity, is the idea of the live museum, bringing the book of Diana Taylor that makes the difference between archive and repertoire, meaning the archive are the things that stay. So to have a museum that fills both things, what actually the museum, the Visual Arts Museum, have been doing. You have, you know, the collection, and you have the live experiences. So I would like to leave for the Aspen Institute and the others here present the idea of the live museum, a museum that keeps and that at the same time have, you know, instigate this live experience that you're talking about, that the performing arts have the power to connect to the moment and immediately. And I think that, and at the same time, we have the power to maintain. And this has to be more sustainable than, you know, and I think that we can learn and have maybe if we put into the framework of a museum, that can be better understood.
Someone said yesterday, and I'm trying to remember the contents, it might have been you, Frank, that said that, but someone said, creating a human instinct for change. I thought, wow, that's a really interesting notion. And it is, that what we need to do is build the human instinct, the human inclination, the human desire for art, culture, as part of their natural life. There's been a lot of controversy around this reality show that's being created for how to become a famous artist. Has everyone heard about this? And when this came up, you know, of course, there was all sorts of controversy in the art world about it. Oh my God, I can't believe we've gone so low. However, I thought it wasn't all such a bad idea, because I thought by creating a kind of popular context for art, well, someone might watch that show and go, oh, you know, maybe I'll go to a gallery. I've never been, because people are afraid, reluctant to walk into a gallery because, well, they don't know how to look at art, they don't know what they're going to see, are they going to be stupid, you know, I mean, all these sort of hang-ups that we have, all these reluctances. And so I actually am, albeit that I'm working in the field of kind of exclusive market building so that prices go up, I'm actually very much a populist in my thinking about access to art, because frankly, well, the more people that buy the art or are inclined to buy it, the prices are going to go up too, you know, exclusive or not.
I think the idea of working in a garret, for me personally, doesn't work. I think artists, this whole thing of artists need to work in a garret. You know, it's quite antiquated actually, and we're in the 21st century, and we do need to be more. I'm not saying we have to be more populist, but we need to be able to use popular culture for the arts and in ways to help sustain the arts and to help grow the arts. I'm not saying that art should become necessarily all popular culture, reality shows. I mean, we know of a reality show in South Africa where they actually put visual artworks into the Big Brother house. So they did this relationship with a bunch of contemporary arts in Johannesburg, and selected artworks, and they put them into the house. And what happened brilliantly was that one day, one of the members in the house looked at this work, and he was like, I don't really understand this. And he had this whole conversation about this artwork, and it went out onto national TV in this weird way of why he didn't understand this particular contemporary artist. And then someone else, and there was a whole debate around that particular work. I think that's fantastic. It raises debate. It puts debate out into the public sphere in ways that people who maybe have not accessed it before are able to access it.
Now, one of the things that I still haven't seen manifest itself too powerfully in the traditional art market is the impact of technology that technology has had, let's say, on the music industry, where there it has completely transformed the old economic models of creation, ownership, distribution, and consumer, and now there seems to be a more direct connection between creator and consumer going through that electronic distribution system. Monetizing that is the big challenge, right, for them. But in the visual arts, there's still this almost medieval, artisan, unique object approach to, that people are still hanging on to. And I'm wondering whether any of you see or foresee where this might be breaking down.
It's going on. It's going on. There, you can download art from the internet now. There's a number of sites that you pay $6 or $5, $10, $20, whatever it is, and you can get a work of art, unlimited work of art. In fact, we're thinking about this. I'm looking at iTunes and thinking about it for our company because we have this extraordinary collection of art, which includes quite a volume of new media. And I'm not certain that new media is going to hold on to its collectible place, even though artists are generating limited edition DVDs or filmic work. I'm not sure what's going to happen with that because it's so easily downloadable. It's so easily disseminated through internet and other public broadcast opportunities. So I'm going to hold on to the fact that it might remain collectible, but we're looking at actually a possible way of disseminating our new media information on a kind of secure way, but also as a research tool, as a fee basis, because I have to figure out how to run this company, whether we're selling art or not selling art, and put our video collection online, and it might be a pay-per-view. So you want to see an artist working in South Africa making a video, so you pay $5 and you see somebody you've never seen, or it might be a subscription, or it might be a combination of both. It's a conversation going on right now. Not downloadable, though everyone tells me everything's downloadable. You just got to figure the patch and you can get it down. But so, there are, I think that it's bound to happen. People ask me, how are you going to market this collection? We're going to have tens of thousands of artworks, 5,000 by the end of this year. Every year it will grow exponentially because we're constantly adding artists. And I might add it, we've closed this one trust in New York, but we will open a second generation of trusts. They may not be regionally based. We're looking next time at continental trusts. The Americas, Europe, East Asia, West Asia, something like that. And
well, I see John Santos in the audience. John, do you have any thoughts? Is he here? Mm-hmm. Oh, I thought he was here.
He was here. I was hoping to get him. I was hoping to get him to talk about the market in cyberspace, because in fact he is Second Life. There is a huge market going on there now. I know on RMB City, which is one of the Chinese sites, Second Life, that the Yulin's Art Foundation is paying like $100,000 for virtual real estate in RMB City. I mean, this is a real economy happening. Anyone in that generation here to talk about that? But it's a real economy, and there's real money changing hands.
Basically, actually, last couple of weeks ago, it was a report about the Second Life, and unfortunately, it's fading. The interest in Second Life, they're losing subscribers and viewers tremendous rate. So if you go to the several real estate companies or several companies buy real estate for marketing purpose or for the museums, actually is empty right now in several places. So the Second Life experience for maybe the investor point of view and how to monetize this market is not working. On the other hand, in Facebook, for example, which is the trendy thing, are looking for ways how to put art in the Facebook, how to interact, for example, collectors. There are several websites that allow the collector to share the collection with somebody else, with other people interested. And it's a way to create interest and to create action in the market.
Yeah,
but unfortunately, Second Life I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, I think Facebook should buy Second Life and give it an afterlife.
Probably it will happen the same.
Well, I think that because this is a conversation, there's a parent company that APT is within called Mutual Art. They have a website, mutualart.com, which is an information dissemination site on art and information, kind of looking at the business of art and collectors and everything. But at one point, and I'd spoken with the founder of APT and Mutual Art, trading platform. I said, you need to establish a trading platform. This would be brilliant if someone would do this where one collector could trade with another. I have a Picasso and you have a Miro or whatever, and let's trade, because I've been living with this painting for 20 years. And I think, and the intermediary, the provider, takes a commission for facilitating the trade. We're looking to how we're going to market our collection online, and we have to. How are we going to sell all this stuff, and direct to market by doing so. So yeah, I think there's unlimited potential, but we've got to get the instinct to go there. We've got to rethink, open the minds a bit, to say. I remember meeting Clive Davis. Let's talk about music. Founder of Arista Records, and he was an acquaintance of mine and bought some art for me when I had a gallery, and he said, it's never going to go online, music, never going to happen. And we're going, really? And look at it now. The same thing, art dealers saying the same thing to me. The person has to see the picture. But art's trading online all the time. So it's definitely happening.
Any other questions out there? I wanted Pablo had started to mention to me how some of the clients that you are advising are really thinking about how they can bring their collections back to their respective countries.
Exactly.
And could you talk a little bit more about some of those initiatives?
Yeah, basically, specifically in Latin America, actually, there's two initiatives that really are a reality in Argentina, specifically with the collection of Museum of Contemporary Art of Constantini and Amalita Fortabat. Basically, they make a deal with the government. They pay everything. I mean, the only concern they have the private investor or the private collector bring back the art or the collection to countries like Argentina, Chile, or Peru is the legal environment, obviously. The possibility of future confiscation for the government, these kind of things. But basically, they cut deals with the government, and they got the guarantees, and they build the fantastic buildings to house the collection. And now, for example, in Chile, it's a very important collection now, and I think in the next month is going to be the announcement to set up the collection there. Obviously, the ownership of the property is going to be for the private collector, but they have a long-term agreement to share the artworks. Something similar happened here with the Thyssen collection, in Madrid. It's a kind of deal. But the most important thing, apart from this, to share the arts, the works with the people in Chile or Argentina, is this foundation are going to be very active in the local, nurturing the local artists with grants, and again, we're going back to the education and creating demand, and making more accessible to the local people. So I think it's going to be definitely it's a trend over there, because in the previous panel also it was a question about how this fantastic collection they are kept in Switzerland in the vaults in the Swiss bank, how we are going to get back to people to enjoy it. And some people are realizing it's the only way to to enjoy that and to pass to a new generation is to make deals with the governments in order to share this kind of ownership.
This is happening in Brazil too. The Daros collection, which was also a Swiss collection,
really.
is now coming back to Brazil, and they're creating an education center and, you know, giving the culture, putting the culture back to where its origins. So it's great.
Well,
Good news.
I think on that positive note, I want to ask you all to join me in thanking our panelists for sharing their insights, and thank you very much.